and I don't have a key. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we had committed to starting promptly at 5:30. We have a couple of board members coming in. The weather has played a little bit of havoc with some of us coming from the further reaches of the county. I know I took over an hour to get here. And so I do know we have a few more, and if you can just give us about 3 minutes, we'll go ahead and get started. The hearing is going to be recorded, and so my colleagues that are facing a bit of a delay in getting here will be able to catch up by reviewing the recording. Additionally, I am extending the regrets of Miss Valeria Paulsen. She is not feeling well tonight, but she will be watching from home. Good evening and welcome. The focus of tonight's public hearing is the initial funding request for the Fairfax County Public Schools Internal Security Review recommendations. Other elements of safety and security are still being developed, and those will be discussed at a later date. On behalf of the school board, I would like to thank you for taking time this evening to come and talk to us about this important topic. At this time, we ask that you please turn off or silence your cell phones. Tonight, we have 27 registered speakers. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes, and to be respectful of everyone, we ask that you stay within that time limit. The timer will start when you begin to speak, and you will be able to see the time remaining on the clock on the lectern. The buzzer will sound at the conclusion of your 3 minutes. 3 names and their speaker numbers will be announced at a time. When you hear your name and speaker number, please move closer to the front of the auditorium so you will be ready when it is your turn to speak. If speakers are not here when their name is called, those names will be called again at a later time. If you have not registered to speak tonight but would like an opportunity to address the board, please see one of the clerks to sign up for one of the 5 extra reserved speaker slots. Your name will be called after registered speakers. Also, there will be an opportunity for individuals to speak if there are no-show speaker slots remaining at the end of the hearing. After all the registered speakers have addressed the board, I will announce whether there are no-show slots available. For this, we ask that you state your full name at the time you speak. After you have spoken, please see one of the clerks so that she may collect your contact information for the record. Throughout the evening, you may notice board members leave the table at times, but they will have access to a TV that is broadcasting the public hearing. Thank you all for attending this evening's public hearing and for sharing your comments and concerns. I will call the first 3 names. First, Patrick Brown, followed by Karan Murari and Kalin Perks. Mr. Brown? Karan Murari?
Hi, my name is Gunnin. I am a rising 7th grader going to Langston Hughes. I am here today to talk about having fewer guns in our schools and to suggest a better way to use our money. I am really concerned that the people who proposed having more guns in our schools get money from the NRA, because the only people who will benefit from guns in our schools will be the NRA, and we kids and our teachers will suffer. During the Parkland shooting, there was a trained deputy who hid behind a wall and didn't come inside the school to help. In Fort Hood, that was full of Army personnel who were trained to handle shooters, 13 people were shot and killed. In Maryland, when there was a shooter at a police station, a trained policeman shot and killed his own colleague, Officer Paulson, by mistake. I recently had an exchange student from Norway. When he saw we had armed guards in our schools, he was very frightened. He told me that no other developed country in the world had armed people in their schools full of children. Instead of putting money into making schools more dangerous by putting more guns in them, we should use it to help us kids. I knew a kid in first grade who had a lot of meltdowns. Most of the time, the only adult who came was the assistant principal to send him home. If there were more behavioral intervention teachers, then that would have helped him, which would have been better than just punishing him. There were other kids in my class who had autism and ADHD, and the only course of action was punishing them. In America, we have seen a spike in autism and ADHD, so we should address that by helping them in our schools, where us kids spend most of our time. Currently, there are more than 22,000 students in our schools that need behavioral help. There are only 17 behavioral intervention teachers to help these 22,000 students. That means each teacher is responsible for 1,300 students, which is simply not possible. An extra $2 million would double the number of behavior intervention teachers. $2 million is less than 1% of the annual FCPS budget. If our money was spent there, then many more kids could be helped. I hope that FCPS will make decisions that will protect kids, not guns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marari. It's always good to hear from students.
Hi, let me introduce myself. My name is Kalin Perks, and I'm going to be a freshman at Woodson High School in the fall. I'm here for the people who can no longer introduce themselves and the people who still can, because they've been talked out of fatal actions by inspiring individuals. I understand that this meeting is about how we can spend money in our schools to help students feel safe and secure. I know that there are people that think having more SROs in schools would be helpful for students to feel safe, but I'm here to say that this is not the answer. What does it mean to feel safe? Merriam-Webster defines safe as being free from harm or risk. There's a lot of things that might come to mind when hearing the words harm or risk. Some might first think of being killed, abducted, assaulted. Others might think of scraping their knee on the playground. To deal with gunshot wounds, you need doctors and police. But what can you do when your main risk is yourself? There is a 0.000002 chance of a student being killed in a school shooting, 1 in 614 million. But a 13% chance for a 12 to 17-year-old to experience clinical depression. Anxiety disorders also affect 1 in 8 children. I haven't even made it to high school, and I already know multiple people who have tried to commit suicide, and many more who have seriously considered it. This is why we need more and better educated counselors for our 198 schools and centers. Research shows that untreated children with anxiety disorders are higher risk to perform poorly in school, miss out on important social experiences, and engage in substance abuse. A professor in the Department of Mental Health at the Bloomberg School has said, there are a growing number of untreated adolescents with depression and that we are making few inroads in getting mental health care to this population. And it is imperative that we find ways to reach these teenagers and help them manage their depression. In November of 2016, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that suicide rates among American middle school students, those aged 10 to 14, were higher than rates of death from motor vehicle crashes in that age group. Suicide is a nationwide problem, but we cannot use this as an excuse to how we treat our students in Fairfax County. You are familiar with the Fairfax County Youth Survey. Let's take a look at some of the data in the 2016 to 17 year. 12th graders were asked about experiencing selected level of stress in the past month. 48% responded with having high levels of stress. 32% of seniors recorded that they had felt sad or hopeless in the past year. When asked if they had considered attempting suicide in the past year, 16% of 12th graders and 14% of 10th graders said they had. With an average of 15%, this means that out of the 2,465 students at my high school, 370 had thought about ending their own life, almost the size of my elementary school, Old Creek. I leave you with this. Should we fill our schools with educated role models who will inspire, help, and welcome students, or lines of officers who will intimidate our children, leaving Fairfax County schools to look more like prisons? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Perks. Valeria Paulsen, followed by Justin Martinez and Tina Williams.
Hi, my name is Valeria Paulsen. This fall, I will be a 6th grader at Great Falls Elementary School. With crazy people targeting gun-free zones to kill people, please allow resource officers to be armed. Also, anyone to be armed who works at the school and who wants to be armed and is properly trained. I know one teacher who is a certified firearms instructor. She wants to carry a concealed handgun so she can protect her students, but is not allowed to. We can't always depend on the police. Sometimes they are scared and hide, like at Parkland. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Paulsen.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to be here and speak to you guys today. My name is Cadet Major Justin Martinez. I am a rising senior at Edison High School. I'm a member of the Edison JRTC Eagle Battalion. I come to you to speak from the perspective of someone who, well, this past year I was the executive officer for the marksmanship team at Edison High School. Now, growing up, I was always raised to treat firearms as a tool, and a tool to be respected. Not something to be feared, but something that definitely does have great power. With the recent rise in school shootings, I feel that it is more than necessary to also educate other children about this fact. School resource officers, I understand that some people may find them to be intimidating, and I get that the conclusions people can draw with the parallels between prison guards. However, for someone like me, who is of the opinion that I am, that firearms are tools to be respected, school resource officers make me feel safe. I understand that they're trained professionals and they're there to help keep everybody safe. They're not just someone to walk the halls and intimidate school students from trying to leave early. They're there to make sure that we're not the ones who are going to be hurt. Now at Parkland, there was a deputy who decided that he was too afraid to run in to do his job for which he was trained. I believe that an increase in SROs, or not even necessarily an increase, a better funding towards training and towards other preventative measures will be far more helpful in combating certain, struggling to find the words for this, certain tragedies that may befall everybody here. Like other speakers have said, there's a minuscule chance that any one student may be targeted in a school shooting in an active shooter environment, but it's something that we no less need to safeguard against. And I feel that having less means of protection, less metal detectors, less SROs, less trained professionals on the scene is not the way to protect our future generations. Thank you very much.
Tina Williams, followed by Corrine Bolno and Katherine Trier.
Good evening, all. Congratulations, Chairwoman Corbett-Sanders and Vice Chair Moon. I'm Tina Williams, an elementary school counselor and president of Fairfax County Federation of Teachers Union. Thank you for this time to speak. FCPS is currently reviewing its safety and security practices for students and employees. Tonight and last week, you heard from teachers, community organizations, and individuals. We ask that our input be reflected in your final decision. We all know that more school counselors in schools for our children at every level, elementary, middle, and high school, is necessary. Elementary level has to be a priority as anxiety and student behaviors that impede academic, social, and emotional learning are increasing among our youngest children who typically have only 1 to 2 school counselors on staff. Elementary school counselors work with teachers and parents on early identification, prevention, and intervention activities, which are integrated into all aspects of children's lives. Children develop learning strategies, self-regulation, and social skills, which promote self-confidence and success and serve as the foundation for academic, career, and social emotional well-being. When it comes to safer schools, our youth have much to share. Young people across our country have voiced that punitive and zero-tolerance policies fall short to resolve conflict and often harm the students that are intended to support, particularly the most vulnerable students with disabilities, children that are economically disadvantaged, and children of color. This has also been echoed by this community. Solutions proposed by young future leaders to address the root causes of conflict fall into 3 areas. The brief, Young People's Vision for Safe, Supportive, and Inclusive Schools recommends increasing school counseling staff, providing comprehensive mental health support such as school psychologists, and putting restorative practices into schools. These solutions actually work and are backed by research. Absent from the suggestions are metal detectors and school policing. Low student-to-school counselor ratios decrease disciplinary incidents, including ones involving weapons, and students and teachers report feeling safer. ASCA, the American School Counseling Association, recommends a student-to-counselor ratio of 250 to 1 or less. Many of our schools have ratios of 400 to 1 or more. Early access to mental health care improves mental health for young people, reduces disciplinary incidents like fighting and other interpersonal conflicts. Proponents of school policing and punitive disciplinary action cite student safety as a primary reason. No substantial evidence supports that position that police presence in schools creates safe learning environments. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Katherine Borden. I have a rising first grader at Bonnie Ray Elementary. I grew up here in Fairfax County, and I'm a graduate of Bonnie Ray, Robinson, and James Madison University. My husband is an employee of the University of Maryland, so between the two of us, we are very familiar and involved with our local education systems. I wanted to thank the school board for their time tonight and everything you do for our children. I truly appreciate it, and I know it's not an easy job. I know that at any point in time, you have a lot of decisions to balance, but at the end of the day, none are more important than sending our children home to us alive. I spoke with Tom Vaccarello at length back in March about my concerns with the safety of our schools. He shared my concerns and discussed the lack of safety and security measures at Fairfax County Public School due to funding. I was very impressed with Tom and was optimistic about the upcoming security review and enhancements that would follow. So when the actual report came out last month, I was left disappointed with the very limited recommendations that did not reflect the conversation I had with Tom. I was frustrated that the recommendations did not reflect the catch-up needed from deferred maintenance of safety and security programs and staffing, along with catch-up needed from the rapid technological advances and changing of today's climate and society. My hope is that the board recognizes this as well and will have a thorough and thoughtful review and discussion of all options in the report, not just the brief recommended section. I also hope the board will ask for more data and benchmarks on all the options before considering what to move forward with. I'd like to address a few specific sections. While I applaud the recommendations regarding the increase of mental health specialists, I can't imagine 18 positions for nearly 200 schools is enough. I would love to see the raw data of the formula used to calculate the current ratio referenced in the report by school, along with benchmarks from an official accredited agency on what they should be and are we meeting those standards. The section on physical and technical security is extremely weak. For example, the fire alarm delay that we have implemented at high schools but not middle and elementary schools is a simple and relatively low-cost option that can save lives. but yet it's not recommended because middle and elementary schools don't have other basic security systems such as cameras and SROs. I want to know how you are going to physically secure our schools if someone comes to the door with a gun. This is a question I've been asking for months and was told this report would answer. My question remains unanswered. Last week, my husband buried a coworker at the University of Maryland. John McNamara was slaughtered at work at the Capitol Gazette when a mentally disturbed individual shot at and shattered the front door made of glass. A glass door just like the door at Sandy Hook that the murderer used to gain access to the elementary school, and just like the glass door at my daughter's elementary school and the entire vestibule. A glass vestibule that leads to an open lobby that visitors do not have to walk through the office to gain access to, that at any point in time, one of the 700 students at Bonnie Brae Elementary 2 are walking in and out to get to the cafeteria, the gym, sorry, emotional about this obviously, 2 music rooms and the lobby. In the 2016 shooting at Townville Elementary School in South Carolina, the murderer debated whether to carry out his attack at his middle school or former elementary school. He chose his elementary school since he knew there was no SRO presence, and he figured he could kill more children. I know there's a heavy debate over the effectiveness of SROs, but there's no debate here that this elementary school was targeted because there was no SRO. I spoke with Sharon Bulova a few weeks ago in person,
Ms.
and when
Bruno,
yes.
if you can wrap up soon.
Sure. I just wanted to mention that I spoke with Sharon Bulova a few weeks ago in person, and when I brought up my concerns about budget, she said, if the school board sends us a request with a plan, I can't imagine we would turn it down. So give her a full comprehensive plan, a non-political, non-biased for the children plan. Thank you for your time.
My name is Katherine Trier, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this evening. On page 2 of the safety and security recommendations, we read, quote, research has shown that the most effective way to ensure a safe school is to have a positive school climate where students know rules and the consequences for breaking them, unquote. Do any of you honestly believe that the Parkland school shooter did not know the rules against guns in the school and the consequences for breaking those rules? Rules do not matter to people who have in their minds to commit murder. The security review recommendations offer only a bureaucratic defensive posture toward a would-be shooter situation. There are no offensive measures discussed, even for a school site security officer whose duties are described with these words: assess, evaluate, initiate, maintain. When time is of the essence, is anyone in a school equipped and permitted to disable a person who is slaughtering innocent people? School shooters have been young males with a history of mental instability, perhaps exacerbated by prescription drugs. But something stands in the way of authorities being able to effectively communicate about the potential threat these young men pose to their school communities. What stands in the way are the U.S. Department of Justice Promise Program and its twin Restorative Justice, which discourage reporting of troublesome behavior. Threads of the Promise and Restorative Justice programs are woven throughout the security recommendations segment on mental health and also the Children's Behavioral Health Blueprint to which it refers. By excusing potentially dangerous behavior as simply a matter of race and or socioeconomic condition, school administrators and law enforcement expose their communities to potentially lethal situations. After spending many hours reading the security recommendations, as well as the tortuous Children's Behavioral Health Blueprint and the Caring Culture Report, I have concluded that bureaucrats have created a monster running amok, and that monster is the Fairfax County Public School System. The FCPS mission to educate students is devolving into a bureaucratic web of social experimentation. Even school staff seems to sense this. In the last engagement survey, administrators and staff were asked, what word best describes how you feel about your work? And for the third year in a row, the most common response was overwhelmed, likely due to the bureaucratic demands of a school system increasingly driven by social agendas. In the 25-page safety and security recommendations, there is only one reference to armed personnel under the section Considerations Reviewed but Not Recommended. Strip away the bureaucratic obfuscation and focus on what will keep our schools safe against a would-be shooter. Good guys with guns do stop bad guys with guns. Don't be afraid to say it. I do have extended remarks. Where should I give them so that you can all get a copy? Thank you.
Doug Crow, Katherine Borden, Kristine Brim.
I'm Doug Crow, and as the parent of 3 Fairfax County school children, I'm here tonight because I have been deeply disturbed by what has happened with school shootings around the country over the past 20 years. We're all here on a common mission tonight of protecting our children. We may disagree on how to best do it, but we're all here with one common goal. After the Columbine tragedy, not only will our lives never be the same, but another result is that outcast and teased kids around the country quickly realize that they could become instantly world famous by simply shooting up a school. We've seen this time and time again over the past 20 years, and the lure of the celebrity status afforded by the media to these disturbed kids continues to make our kids' schools targets. We can no longer hope that this won't happen here, because hope is not a strategy. I submit that in Fairfax County it's beyond time to take immediate action. With a show of hands from the board as well as the people in the audience, how many people here are familiar with who Jesse Osborne is? 1, 2. Jesse Osborne is a 13-year-old in Columbia, South Carolina, who in early 2017 attempted to shoot up his middle school. As a 13-year-old, Jesse spent many months researching and planning his school attack. He went so far as to track administrator routines, locations of hall monitors, the teacher breaks, and knew the delivery schedules to the school so he could gain entry. He rehearsed his plan and knew exactly what doors the kids would exit when a fire alarm was pulled. Does this sound familiar? This same type of plan was done in the Parkland shooting earlier this year. Jesse followed several serial killer fan blogs and is quoted as saying, and I quote, "I can't wait to be famous. I hope to kill 50 or 60, but if I get lucky, maybe 150. On the morning he chose, he had breakfast and then murdered his father. He then went to his school intent on mass murder. By the grace of God, his gun jammed and a tragedy of many children being murdered was averted." Make no mistake, folks. What we're up against here is evil in its purest form, and we must have a capability to stop it. These types of evil people aren't crazy. They're actually very smart and know exactly what they're doing. So what can we do about it? First thing we have to do is recognize that our kids' schools have become targets. Of course, we'll try better to recognize at-risk kids, but an example of such as Jesse Osborne, other than sheer luck, will only be stopped by a deadly force capability on site. We need to put doubt into the minds of other potential coward shooters and make it known as a deterrent that in Fairfax County, deadly force on site is an option that we hold and we will use it. One option is a secured safe or two with a firearm in it. Only a few trained administrators and teachers who would choose would have access. In the Newtown tragedy, the school security and lockout procedures actually worked. The shooter couldn't initially get in. Sadly, the 911 call went on several minutes while he found a way in which an emergency situation is an eternity. It's beyond time we face the facts. Stop making this a political issue. It isn't. It's a life and death issue. The estimated 350 million guns in the United States are not going to magically go away. They simply aren't. In closing, just as I've done on many occasions myself, I'd like for the parents and the board members in the audience to imagine hearing a breaking news alert come across that a school shooting has happened in Fairfax County. Now try and imagine what you'd want in place inside the school for the 5 minutes or so it takes for the police to arrive. We only have 2 choices. We can hope and wish for a minimal loss of life, but also do anyways, and our other choice is knowing that your child can possibly be protected by a trained adult whom we've entrusted our kids to every day anyways. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit that hope is not a strategy, and I implore you to consider all options. Let's check our egos at the door and not let politics get in the way of doing whatever it takes to protect our kids from potential monsters like Jesse Osborne. Thank you.
Thank you. Katherine Borden, followed by Kristine Brim, or Karen Vaught.
Good evening. My name is Katherine Borden, and I have 2 children in Fairfax County Elementary Schools. I am also the Moms Demand Action local group lead for Alexandria, Virginia. Our local group of Alexandria moms encompasses both the city of Alexandria and its own school system, ACPS, and the portions of Alexandria located in Fairfax County. In March, a school resource officer who is a 5-year veteran of the Alexandria City Police Department was sitting in his office in George Washington Middle School and accidentally fired his gun through a wall in the school building. Fortunately, No one was injured, but the incident left many Alexandria parents terrified about the possibility of a similar accident with an SRO in a school. So I echo the many other comments who spoke last week and tonight, stating that more SROs or armed individuals are not the solution to make our schools safer. Instead, I suggest encouraging parents and family to learn and understand the importance of keeping guns away from kids. Moms Demand Action has researched and developed a program called Be Smart, which is a nonpartisan program aimed at keeping guns away from kids and teens. We have these small cards that can be distributed along with all the other literature that goes home in those Monday and Friday or Wednesday folders. What Be Smart is an acronym. S stands for secure guns in your home and vehicles. M is model responsible behavior around guns. A, ask about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes. R, recognize the risks of teen suicide. T, tell your peers to be smart. What I really want to focus on especially is the recognize the risks of teen suicide, which I knew nothing about before I became concerned about gun violence after Sandy Hook. This is really something that I believe we need to focus on, and keeping guns away from kids in Fairfax County is important. I'd be happy to provide all of you or any of you with as many of these as you need to send home in school folders. Thanks.
My name is Kristine Brim, speaking for the Fairfax County Republican Committee. First, I have a request for the school board or police department to post on their websites the data that the NAACP provided to them that was the topic of a recent July 13th Fairfax Times article to enable a public, independent review of that data and of the NAACP's analysis. Now, on the topic of the School Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding, which relates to the security issues we're discussing tonight, the great majority of Fairfax stakeholders agree on the changes in the SRO responsibilities in the MOU draft. The MOU draft also meets the high standards of the National Association of School Resource Officers. In fact, as more schools employ SROs that meet those standards, juvenile arrests throughout the United States have fallen. For example, between 1996 and 2016, juvenile arrests declined 70% as SRO programs were widely adopted. A University of Tennessee 2009 study, Controlling for Economic Variables, showed the presence of an SRO led to a 52% decrease in assault arrests and a 72% decrease in weapons possession arrests. Data from the Virginia Center for School and Campus Safety show that as SROs have been added across Virginia, schools had decreases in gangs, bullying, physical fighting, weapons in school, and student access to guns. Carleton University just released a 2-year study showing that every dollar invested in SROs created over $11 of social and economic value, including prevention of property damage, prevention of student injuries and death due to violence and drug overdoses, reduced probability that a student will get a criminal record, increased probability that students, particularly those with mental health issues, will get the help that they need from social service and healthcare systems, and an increase in feelings of safety among students and staff. A strong SRO program also demonstrates prudence, risk management, and duty to care by the school system. The National Association of SROs notes, and I quote, "State law firmly establishes that educators are liable when students are not protected from routine and foreseeable risks of harm. Fairfax schools should take care not to weaken the role of SROs and then find the county fails to meet generally accepted national standards." Finally, critics of SROs run the risk of overreaching and dangerously weakening the collaboration of SROs in our state-mandated school threat assessment teams, which are a model across the country. The SRO program is working for students, teachers, and community. Like any program, you can improve it, but please take care not to break it. And I have copies to give to the, okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Vaught, and I have a child who's a rising senior at Edison and 2 graduates from Edison High School. I'd like to thank you all for inviting our input today and for your commitment to protecting our students from gun violence by reviewing and improving school safety and security practices. We've heard from advocates for more counseling services, from the NAACP and its allies about the dangers to non-white students of adding more armed officers, from gun violence prevention advocates who rightly point out that keeping guns out of the hands of disturbed people should be a priority in our country, and from parents opposed to arming school personnel, especially teachers. I add my voice to those opposed to guns in school, and I thank you for not wasting our scarce resources. I know how much time you all put into the budget and how little the pool of money is. There is no evidence that armed civilians are effective against mass shooters, and plenty of evidence that they are not. The mere presence of guns in schools increases the risk of gun injuries and deaths. In just one 2-day period in March of this year, in 2 days, there were 3 negligent gun discharges by armed school personnel in this country. As Katherine said, a school resource officer right here in Alexandria shot his gun through a middle school classroom wall. He was a beloved officer who the community liked very much, but people make mistakes. A sheriff in Michigan left his loaded service weapon in a school locker room where a 6th grader found it. And a teacher and reserve police officer in California shot his gun during a gun safety course, injuring 3 students. He later stepped down. That's 3 incidents in 2 days by trained law enforcement personnel. It's ridiculous to even discuss arming civilians. Further, all evidence shows that turning our schools into hardened targets does not work. Mass shooters are not deterred by the presence of armed law enforcement. We need look no further than the tragic high school massacres for the sad evidence. Studies show that mass shooters are suicidal. Death is their expectation, and armed officers do not deter them. Most of the high schools, in fact, all of them, had armed personnel present. We know it is effective. Encouraging lawmakers, like you did in your February resolution, to pass meaningful, evidence-based gun violence prevention laws. And in the meantime, our school system can actively encourage families to lock their guns away from children and teens. Both Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America and the Brady Campaign for Gun Safety offer free gun access safety programs. I gave our Be Smart flyers that Katherine showed you, a little more comprehensive one, to the clerk to give to all of you, and we're happy to, for free, all these lovely people in red shirts will come to the schools and talk about keeping guns away from students. As you know, most school shooters get their guns from home. And also Sandy Hook Promise, which was started by parents whose children were slaughtered at Sandy Hook Elementary. You mentioned what would you do if your kid was involved in a school shooting? Well, these families lost their 1st graders. And what they did was to decide that kids need psychologists and programs to help them rather than more guns in schools. So thank you.
Monique Rudy, followed by Matt Trong and Casey Utley.
As a mother of several sons in Fairfax County Public Schools, I take school safety and security very seriously. I'm a mother who has had to bury a child, and no parent should ever have to go through that. That's just not the way life is supposed to work. Efforts to keep our children safe at school should be commended, and I appreciate the fact that FCPS has completed a comprehensive safety and security review. Unfortunately, I fear that the recommendations do not best utilize our resources to prevent future security incidents. I can't understand how millions of dollars worth of security cameras are going to prevent a future attack. Security cameras may help reduce the number of victims in an attack, or they may help prosecute the perpetrator of an attack, but I can't see how they would actually prevent an attack from happening in the first place. Which should be our goal? As a society, we should not be any less upset if 4 students are killed instead of 10. We should be ashamed that we failed another child and let them go on thinking that the best way to solve their problems is to carry out evil acts of violence toward others. The U.S. Secret Service and U.S. Department of Homeland Security just this month released a report titled An Operational Guide for Preventing Targeted School Violence. One of the main things I took away from reading this report is that FCPS schools lack a central reporting mechanism. If I witnessed troubling behavior from a local student, I wouldn't know where or whom to report it to. We live in a densely populated area with broken school pyramids, tons of youth sports and other enrichment opportunities, which leads to school children interacting with youth from all over FCPS. If a threat crosses school boundaries, who do you report it to? What types of threats rise to the level of a call to 911? I'm not sure. A central reporting system would solve all that. An interdisciplinary team could then review all reported threats to evaluate the seriousness of the threats and also to look for trends. How many more students might take advantage of the opportunity to use see something, say something if they knew they could make a report anonymously? The FBI recently held a day-long seminar on preventing mass school shootings, and their research of 63 active shooters showed that 77% had spent a week or longer planning their attack, and many had presented multiple warning signs in the year before their crime. As we consider spending significant amounts of money to help provide safety and security in our schools, I think we should focus our efforts on prevention. I also think that in training the community to look for warning signs and to take advantage of the central reporting system, we could take the opportunity to reassure students that they are safe in school. Despite the fact that 2018 has proven to be fraught with violence, the number of multiple victim school shootings and the total number of gunshot victims in schools has actually declined since the 1990s. U.S. school children are more likely to be killed in a bicycle or pedestrian accident while traveling to school than they are to be shot at school. Our children deserve the reassurance that the adults around them are keeping them safe. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me some time to talk today. I'm a father with 2 children in Fairfax School. What I do for a living is I'm the professional focusing on physical security. I do this for the U.S. government. I do this for all the agencies. I do this for the international communities. So, I have a speech, but frankly, I can refer back to Corinne's speech earlier. We have a fixed budget. And, instead of reading and doing research and long, reports and all that, we got to reflect on the common sense approach, right? Just simple as that. Why have a glass door? Why don't we have a hardened doors? If the doors are locked on the outside, what happens if the bad guys are actually inside a building? Would you want to harden the classrooms? What about trailers? I haven't heard anybody talking about that. I haven't read a report, but we ought to seriously thinking about this. And the last thing, I know I got 3 minutes here, but bottom line is I do appreciate what you do every day. It's not easy to do what you do, and I thank you very much for doing that. What you do have, right, is the decision that you make does impact not only the children, but we haven't heard about the staff, the teachers, the principals, the superintendent. We haven't talked about it. They're human beings too. And to the other point about the SRO, now, while I'm driving in, I was talking to a friend about, well, tell me more about the SRO. It turns out that we don't have the SROs for all the schools, especially elementary schools. The last time I checked, that's our students as well. Okay, so whatever you do, right, make the right decision. It is the year end. Make investment in one-time expense if you need to. And actually think about the common sense approach, how we harden our schools. And like I said, this is what I do for a living. And when you think about common sense, you would prevent and solve all kind of simple problems. Thank you very much.
My name is Casey Utley, and I'm here representing Showing Up for Racial Justice, Northern Virginia. I'm also a parent of 4 children, 3 of whom attend Fairfax County schools. I'm here to reiterate the prior concerns of Fairfax NAACP and SEPTA last week that our schools be safe places for students of color, particularly those with disabilities. We join these two groups in calling for counselors, not cops. We believe our communities are made safe by us, and police presence only escalates the potential for violence, especially against Black and brown students, whom we know are disproportionately targeted by police for scrutiny, harassment, arrest, and abuse. Our county is currently reviewing the relationship between Fairfax County Schools and the Fairfax County Police Department. We strongly support scaling down police presence in schools with the ultimate goal of returning to cop-free schools. Many localities around the country have created safe learning environments without the use of school resource officers and armed personnel. Some of us here may even remember the days when we went to schools like that. We've been in meetings with Fairfax Board of Supervisors in which experts told us that positive interactions with adults like parents, teachers, counselors, coaches prevent teen involvement in violence, while negative interactions like those that they have with police increase the likelihood of violence. We oppose any effort to increase policing in our schools. We're also concerned about the well-being of students who will be subject to the proposed $20 million worth of surveillance through closed-circuit TV. This proposal will likely put students of color at greater risk of discipline, action, and targeting by police. If we instead invested those resources in the $2 million line item for mental and social support staff, we could have 180 new counselors instead of 18. We echo the call made in the Movement for Black Lives policy platform for a divestment from racist policing and more investment in our children, particularly our Black and brown children. Thank you.
Mike Woltz, followed by Andrea Beyer and Hilary Spring.
My son's first grade in public school was first grade, which required principal discretion and an assessment. The school was determined to make him repeat kindergarten, even though he was reading before he got out of preschool. Had we allowed that to happen, who knows what besides the boredom, loss of self-esteem, frustration, resentment, feeling of being punished for no fault of his own, what behaviors could have resulted from that. A few years later, he and the other Black American boy in his class disproportionately were cleaning the lunchroom tables in the cafeteria. After we intervened, took it to the administrative level, the situation was changed. However, those are two of too many. I don't have time to tell you all the experiences we've had to do to prevent him from ending or heading towards that school to prison pipeline. As a Black American father of two Black American kids, that is a huge concern for me. Recognizing that Fairfax, for all its positives, has a deficiency in cultural competency. It's only had an office in place for 3 to 4 years. Training has not been rolled out to all the schools yet. For that reason, if our school, faculty, and staff are not yet competent in dealing with students of color, I have no confidence that SROs can do any better right now. They should not be in an elementary school except on the perimeter at most. Reading the MOU and the authorities they have to interrogate, investigate, question minor children without their parents' consent or authority is disturbing to me and runs right up into constitutional violations. If we want to prevent a school shooting, if we want to stop a school shooting, the best way is to prevent it. Use intelligence from social media, staff, teachers, parents, kids. Coordination between federal and local law enforcement to see methods and strategies for gathering, assessing threats, cutting them off before they start. Bringing more police who do not have the cultural competency, the relationship, the trust of students when our own teachers need that training just makes a bad situation worse. Thank you.
Good evening. I am a lifelong resident of Fairfax County, and not only have I raised my 3 daughters in Fairfax, but over the last 20+ years, I've sat through countless school board meetings. Let's just say I easily remember the days when our FCPS parents, students, teachers, school administrators, and members of our community at large were all begging this school board to place in our schools, and particularly our high schools, armed police officers. Fortunately, the school board listened to these requests, and we have all benefited knowing that our schools have been made safer because of the presence of these armed officers. But sadly, over these same 2 recent decades, I've also watched as the overall behavioral levels of some of our students in this county, just like all across our country, have significantly declined, and in some instances, such behavior has gotten way out of hand. Thus, today I know personally of both teachers and administrators alike who say they are not only forced to regularly cope with such behavior, but they are directed to actually tolerate and ignore a variety of persistent and disruptive behaviors. As a mom, I personally could name a couple of instances during which I would have loved to have had a school resource officer, or SRO, stationed in my daughter's classroom. Needless to say, I was shocked at what I heard last Thursday's hearing and tonight, when I sit in the same auditorium and listen as speaker after speaker not only denigrate our SROs, but several of these speakers specifically question the personal character and ethics of our wonderful SROs. And sadly, they purport that our SROs are incapable of making fair and impartial judgments as they specifically pertain to race and minority students, as well as to that segment of students who have learning and behavioral disabilities. Additionally, I listen as several of these speakers spout off a variety of so-called facts and data that somehow prove that our SROs are unable to make unprejudiced decisions when it comes to student behavior, and that such obvious and innate biases of the SROs in our schools directly contribute to the school-to-prison pipeline. So I ask this board to obtain and read a copy of a document. It's called To Protect and Educate the School Resource Officer and Prevention of Violence in Schools, that was issued by the National Association of School Resource Officers, or NASRO, in 2012, and a revised edition is near completion. I thank you for your time, and before you make any hasty decisions, I think you need to look at lots of documents that counter the biased decisions that paint our school resource officers as prejudiced or biased. Thank you.
Hilary Spring, Tom Williams, and Cheryl Or.
My name is Hilary Spring, and I am the parent of a young child who I intend to enroll in Fairfax County Public Schools within the next several years. Thank you for the opportunity to publicly address the recent internal security review recommendations tonight. Let me start by expressing my support for the allocation of funds to increase the staffing by 18 mental health specialists. According to the National Association of School Psychologists, school mental health supports that encompass social emotional learning, mental wellness, resilience, and positive connections between students and adults are essential to creating a school culture in which students feel safe and empowered to report safety concerns, which has proven to be among the most effective school safety strategies, end quote. Schools should be a safe and supportive environment for all children to grow, learn, and develop. That includes children who are at risk, who may be under duress, and who may have limited safety nets and/or financial means. I am encouraged by the recommendation's acknowledgement of supporting the whole child within the safety review. I would also like to acknowledge the role that parents and responsible adults should be asked to play in school safety. According to a Wall Street Journal article published in April of this year, there had been 32 school shootings since 1990 that left at least 3 people dead or injured. Of the 20 cases where data was available, 17 of the shooters obtained firearms from their homes or a relative's home. The article was published ahead of the school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas, where the shooter used a shotgun and pistol taken from his father. Parents, guardians, and responsible adults have a role to play in reducing the risk of gun violence within our schools. Firearms should be locked and stored inaccessible to children, and information and training should be available through the school system to educate and inform parents and guardians on how to ensure that guns do not fall into unintended hands. Measures to secure guns at home will not alone end school shootings, but they will reduce the risk of gun violence, both intended and unintended, amongst children and adolescents in our community. Thank you.
Is Mr. Williams here? Then we'll have Cheryl Or, followed by Joe Loger and Daniel Paulson.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Or, and I want to thank the members of the school board for undertaking this important initiative and opening up this forum for public comment. And I come as a Fairfax County resident. I urge the school board to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. And I really feel like using $18 million to add resource officers to elementary school is definitely going in the wrong direction and will only serve the heart in the school system. I feel like the proposal to add mental health specialists to schools is a step in the right direction and should be considered as the first step. And I also feel like these positions should be augmented on an annual basis. The school to prison pipeline is a real thing. It is a disturbing national trend where children are funneled out of the public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice system. Many of these children have learning disabilities or histories of poverty, abuse, or neglect, and would benefit from additional educational and counseling services. Instead, they're isolated, punished, and pushed out. Zero tolerance policies criminalize minor infractions of school rules, while cops in schools lead to students being criminalized for behavior that should be handled inside the school. Students of color, as the statistics show, are especially vulnerable to these push-out trends and discriminatory application of discipline. As a military spouse, I have seen all kinds of school systems. I've seen good school systems and bad school systems. The good systems are the ones that have a whole child approach and make sure that children are safe and secure. To educate the whole child means to use all the available resources to maximize the achievement, skills, opportunities, and potential of each student by building upon his own strengths and addressing his or her needs. A whole child approach prepares students to thrive in a democratic and diverse society and a changing world as knowledgeable, creative, engaged citizens and lifelong learners. I can happily say that I have two sons who are educated through Fairfax County school system, and they are in fact engaged citizens and lifelong learners. I want to close by saying I urge Fairfax County School to be that beacon of light on the hill during these dark times. Together we can do the hard work and address root cause problems and avoid knee-jerk reactions that are costly and ineffective. Thank you.
Joe Loger. So we'll go with Daniel Paulson, Jack Looney, and Mark Shin.
Hello there. My name is Daniel Paulson. I'm a Fairfax resident with two daughters in Fairfax Public Schools. I wish to thank the school board for the opportunity to speak. With all due respect, I would like to point out to the board that as a worker, I have lost several hours of wages, having to leave my job early, pick up my daughter from home, who is also on the list of speakers, and then drive to the meeting. May I suggest in the future, all such meetings be on weekdays, 7:30 p.m., or on Saturday after 10:30 a.m., or Sunday after 2 p.m. This way, my older daughter and other workers, like my wife, could attend this important meeting. That being said, with maniac killers targeting gun-free zones, it is critical that security resource officers be armed at all schools. Also, those school personnel who wish and who are properly trained should be allowed to carry firearms. I personally know two certified firearm instructors who are public school teachers. Both these ladies would like to carry concealed firearms to protect their students and themselves, but are not allowed to. Thank you.
Jack Looney, Mark Shin, followed by Rick Baker.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Mark Shen. I've been a resident of Fairfax County for many, many years. The laws, rules, and regulations of gun control have failed. The only measure that will stop an attack is armed defense. The laws, rules, and regulations of gun control have failed to stop previous school shootings. Nobody complains about armed security inside a government building. Nobody complains about armed security inside a jewelry store. Nobody complains about armed security inside a bank. Begging will not stop an attack. Crying will not stop an attack. The only measure that will stop an attack is armed security. There is never an easy and perfect solution. I thank you for your time.
Rick Baker, followed by David Chipman and Robert Walter.
Good evening. I am Rick Baker. I live in Herndon, Virginia. And after I've heard so much tonight, I have to say you have a real problem. So I'm just going to can this briefing here. Everything you've heard has been incredible. I have to tell you, I cannot believe how bad this school system has it in terms of security, protecting the kids, and taking care of the kids. This is just an incredible problem. So the solution, I spent 30 years in the Air Force defending this nation. Deterrence is what I do. I deterred the Soviets, I deterred the Chinese, and a whole bunch of other people from attacking this country. And I had the resolve that if deterrence failed, that I would act with your nation's best weapons. Deterrence works, and that's what this is about. Now, I agree with everything that everybody's asked for tonight, but it has to be asked for from a systems perspective. You've got to look at all of these problems and all of these great solutions and figure out how to put in the layers in the school system to make it all work together. That's a lot of money, I know, but you can decide how to do that. Now, I think having an armed security guard gives you deterrence. Shooters do know where people have guns to protect the facilities, and shooters do not attack those facilities if they have any chance of living. And if they do see that a guard is there, they may understand what the guard's routine is and get by the guard. So, guards do make a difference. Armed guards do make a difference. It's part of your deterrence solution. It's part of this systems approach that you need to take. Now, I know it's going to cost a lot of money to have all these guards that are armed and stuff, but you know that just recently, in the last couple of days, in Lee County, Virginia, that they approved teachers who want to defend their classroom and themselves that carry and be official officers, police officers of the court so that they can defend the school. Now, that's not just teachers have a bunch of guns come into school. Oh no, this is rigorous. It's tough training. It's really good equipment. It's authorized by the state. And so that is a solution. It's cheaper than having a whole bunch of armed guards too. So you need to find the solutions. These people have given you the solutions. Find them in some combination. Find a systems approach to this. Deterrence does work. Thank you very much.
David Chipman, followed by Robert Walter and Stella Pekarsky.
Good evening. My name is David Chipman. Thank you for your service to the county and the country. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight about school security, and in particular how to defend places of learning. For 25 years, I served as a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. At ATF, I was a highly trained operator assigned to the agency's version of SWAT. I served details with the United States Secret Service assigned to protect presidential candidates. And later in my career, I was charged with overseeing all firearms programs for the entire nation. Since my retirement from ATF in 2012, I've served in many roles, most recently as a senior policy advisor at Giffords, the gun violence prevention organization founded by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. In Virginia, it is lawful for any 18-year-old high school senior to purchase through a private sale, absent a background check and outside the knowledge of law enforcement, each of the same guns I was issued as an ATF special agent. This includes semi-automatic assault rifles and handguns. It makes sense we are concerned about gun violence in our Virginia schools. I've heard it suggested that arming teachers would make our schools safer. It is my opinion that this is a dangerous proposal that makes schools far less safe. Armed teachers become targets for attackers who aim to steal a gun to then use in an attack. Armed teachers focused on learning cannot be expected to defend a school as effectively as trained law enforcement personnel focused on security. Arming teachers is in conflict with the sensible options detailed within the internal security review recommendations in question today. Arming teachers is a tactic flawed at its very core. Confidence in an armed teacher and engaging an attacker who is already struck with the element of surprise and in the process of killing children is misplaced. We can do better than that plan, and in my opinion, after reviewing the 25 pages of detailed security recommendations, you already have. Some may wonder if this plan is enough. Can more be done? That's a fair question. And if others share this concern, I offer the following thoughts. Public safety officials have effectively eliminated acts of violence with a gun in most public spaces with enhanced security. These spaces have one thing in common. They ensure civilians cannot carry firearms into the protected space. I'm not suggesting signs proclaiming a gun-free zone will prevent a shooting. Rather, I'd point to security encountered when we visit museums, concert venues, courthouses, and government buildings. Securing public spaces is difficult, but we know how to do it. None rely on armed civilians. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Walter. I come to you tonight as a parent of 2 children in Fairfax County Public Schools. I'm also a dad who demands action that we do not add any more guns to our schools here in Fairfax County. I agree with all the recommendations in the report and many of the other speakers here this week who have said that we do not need to add more SROs to schools or armed teachers. I came tonight to talk about the main issue that no other speaker other than one has even mentioned, is the fact that the biggest thing we could do to make our children safer in Fairfax County Public Schools would be to actually put them in the schools. Instead of the 22,000 students that currently learn and sit in trailers every day, where they're not very secure. The size of this problem is very large. We have 800 plus trailers in Fairfax County, which is many more than we've had in previous years. It has been growing over the last 15 years. There are 20,000 plus students in trailers at this time in Fairfax County. For a little perspective, that is the same size as the entire Arlington County public school system. There are 800 teachers who also serve and spend their time every day in Fairfax County trailers. And we make them much safer if we could bring them inside the building rather than outside in the parking lot where there's just one flimsy door or a window protecting them from being attacked. One of the teachers I spoke to recently said that he remembers during the days of the Beltway Bandit, who was riding around DC shooting people, that he would nervously watch every time one of his kids had to leave the trailer to go to the school to go to the bathroom because there were no bathrooms in the trailers where they serve right now. Not only is this a safety issue, it's also a health issue, as we've seen in recent years with issues of mold, poor cooling, poor heating in the trailers that are affecting our students and our teachers' health. But spending the extra money that we would spend on putting more guns in schools to build quicker and renovate faster instead of our 37-year plan that we're on right now to update the schools, make it the recommended 20 to 25-year plan that Mr. McElveen has brought up, would greatly ensure the safety of our schools and our teachers and our students. So I urge you to work with the Board of Supervisors to direct any money that you would have spent toward arming more teachers or putting more SROs in schools, toward actually building more schools, renovating them, and bring all our students inside where it'd be much safer. Thank you very much.
You're not Stella. I'm not Stella. Good evening. I'm Jane Miscavige. I'm the new president of Fairfax County Council PTA. Stella had signed up to speak on our behalf for our 170 PTAs, but she is under the weather and she's watching us on TV right now. So Stella, sorry if I blow your speech. Dr. Brabrand and staff, thank you for undergoing this thoughtful security review. It is no small feat. We appreciate it, and we acknowledge that keeping our students safe in a nurturing, welcoming school environment demands a strong partnership between school staff and parents. We're committed to working with all of you as well as with the school board today and continuing forward. Fairfax County Council PTA supports many of the same thoughts expressed by the advocates at last week's meeting. We especially support funding for additional mental health staff. We've heard from many parents about the security review, so tonight I'd just like to present a couple of the questions that we've been hearing to you. Notably, parents were surprised that during the security review, there was no discussion of a basic security measure, that being physical barriers. As Mr. Walter just stated, we have more than 20,000 students in trailers. If we're committed to keeping them safe, bringing them inside school classrooms and their main school buildings is essential. While we lock our school building doors and require visitors to be buzzed in by staff, anyone can walk around a building and find students outside. Parents have reported that many times students walk between buildings and trailers with no adult supervision and no way to protect themselves against an intruder wishing to cause them harm. These trailers are often located near major roads, school construction areas, and wooded areas. We know there are long-term goals and hopes to move all students inside of school buildings, but in the interim, can you explain to parents the ways in which the students who learn in trailers are being protected? Parents have also raised questions as to the efficacy of the lockdown model of response. Is this based on current best practices? Is there guidance as to the best way to execute the drills or the best language to use with students? What language can we parents use at home when we're talking with our kids about a drill they've just participated in? We have heard and we share concerns from parents reporting their youngest children, especially, coming home after lockdown drills being very, very frightened. Many of our special education students and those with high levels of anxiety tend to obsess over these drills for days. Surely, children that are scared can't learn. How are we supporting these children before and after the drills? Lastly, I'd like to hit upon one brief issue since I'm speaking on behalf of the organization. It's essential to teaching children to make safe choices. We know there have been instances when students have brought firearms to school or when they've been exposed to them in their neighborhoods and even at home. We ask you to reevaluate the curriculum surrounding firearm safety. Teach kids what is a gun, what does it look like, what can you do if you see one, or if you know of someone in the school who has one. Who do you tell? How do you keep yourself safe? Teach them about the importance of locking firearms and keeping them away from children. Perhaps this curriculum could fit into existing health units. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We have Jamie Martinez, followed by Pamela Sharon and Radhika Murari.
Gonna need these. Thanks for having me speak tonight. My name is Jamie Martinez. I first moved into Fairfax County and enrolled in Fairfax County Public Schools in 1968. Since that time, I've lived and worked in and around Fairfax County. I have one child already graduated from Fairfax County, and the cadet major you spoke to earlier is my youngest. In between those two kids, I did work as a bail enforcement agent. This gave me a glimpse into the general population that I had never before seen or even thought possible. Up until that time, I thought that we lived amongst gentle and honest people for the most part. I was not naive by any stretch of the imagination. Before my 24th birthday, I had been shot at, I had been robbed at gunpoint, I had been eyewitness to an attempted murder, a murder, and a suicide. All but one of those were in Fairfax County. The scope of what I saw working with people who didn't show up for court was shocking to me. The people that are just as easily sell you drugs, stab you, shoot at you, rob you, would just as easily let their parents go homeless as their parents had put up their house for bail money. These people are in and around us, all around us, and you would be surprised. I ask all of you to ask any beat cop what they think of some of the people that live in and around our county. If you choose not to talk to the police, I'm sure I can provide you with plenty of bail enforcement officers and bondsmen who will tell you the same thing. We're now talking about what protects our most treasured items in this world. The police use guns to protect themselves and us. And if you ask these police, they need the guns to protect themselves. They need the guns to protect us. I'm not asking you to arm teachers, certainly not all of them, at least not at this meeting, but I am asking that you not cripple the one deterrence we have in our school to protect our most treasured items. Unless and until we have the wherewithal to harden our schools to make them impenetrable, and we have the money to pay for that, I'm begging you to let our officers protect themselves with the same tools that they should protect our students with, protect us with. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for allowing this very important discussion. I haven't been here since 1985, I think, and I'm grateful to see Janie still here and Mr. Moon, but the rest of you are brave and have a very difficult job. The one thing that, so I'm a parent of two children in Fairfax County. I have been on school board committees. I have done many different things, worn many different hats in the last 30 years. And this is the one most critical issue that my heart bleeds for the teachers in the classrooms in figuring out how to deal with the students on this subject. We've seen such tragedies. The one thing that I wanted to point out that, well, I would like to first, my hat goes off to Mr. Chipman, who I think brought some very important points, and also the counselor. I think those are the two people who provided the most important information. And to, let me just reiterate that I think that it would be a crime for any of you to give in to the illogic that more guns is going to be more protective of our children. More guns in our society makes our society more dangerous. We don't want to go back to the Wild West where we're arming every other person in every other situation. Metal detectors, while expensive, that to me it makes the most sense. Metal detectors and very well-trained counselors are probably the two places that I would ask you to focus and put money into. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Radhika. You heard my son speak earlier. I wanted to just say a few things. One is I've heard the speakers who talk about putting more guns in our schools lean on words like I believe, I feel, and I think. We need to start looking at facts instead of being gaslit by opinions, because you know what they say about opinions. First, I'd like to say I don't think any of us is proposing that we have fewer counselors. We're just saying we don't need more civilians with guns in our schools surrounded by our students. To the lady who said that she wanted an SRO in her daughter's class and who says that she wants an SRO when there's a difficult situation, what exactly does she think an SRO with a gun is going to do when one child is fighting with another? There's really only one thing in her mind when there is an adult with a gun present. The other question that raises is, many people are saying we're using SROs with guns to protect our kids from outside threats. But we just had a proponent of more SROs say that she wants an SRO with a gun in a classroom when children are fighting with other children. So I think if we're going to advocate for guns in schools, we have to be crystal clear about who gets the gun and what those guns are used for, lest people like my little kid, who's brown, are going to be the kids who are hurt the most. To the person who said that we have an armed security inside a government building or a bank, again, this is a difference in degree is a difference in kind. Having armed security when there is a government building is different from having teachers and other civilians running around with guns in places that are inhabited by children. Then there was the gentleman who said that we're going to train our teachers through tough training, and we're going to deter people from hurting our kids. First of all, that kind of language where we're taking our schools and making them war zones is deeply unsettling to me as a human being, as an American, and as a parent of a child in one of these schools. Also, when he says we're going to have tough training, are we going to make our teachers and our SROs get more training than the NYPD? The NYPD is well known to have among the best marksmen in the country, and they have a hit rate of about 30%. So now some people are suggesting not only should our teachers teach our kids, they should have a secondary career in becoming marksmen. That is absolutely ludicrous. And to the person who was the bail bondsman and had been shot and all these horrible things happened to him, personal anecdotes aside, Fairfax County is one of the safest counties in the country. Those are, again, just statistics. So once again, I hear from the pro-guns in all of our schools people, lots of opinions and feelings, and I want this and I want that. And I want the FCPS school board to start making decisions based on facts. Thank you.
So we have Mandy Collins, and then I'm going to go back to our no-shows. Patrick Brown and Tom Williams, Joe Loger, and Jack Looney. Ms. Collins, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time and your really serious consideration on this topic. It is so important to all of us, and to me on a very, very, very personal level. I am a school shooting survivor. It has been 19 years since I ran for my life. I was barely 15 years old, and a 15-year-old brought two guns into my school. And so it is such a personal topic to me. And I'm not going to speak on the school resources officers because we appreciate all that you guys do. I know it's not an easy job, so that is not my priority. I want to talk about a couple of other things. Please don't arm teachers. They already do everything. They've already got a million hats on. They do not need any more jobs. Their attention is divided enough. Please leave that for the people who are trained. Another thing that others have said with moms, the Be Smart program through Moms Demand Action is an amazing program on how to educate kids, how to store guns safely. These are all things that people should know in order to prevent both school shootings and suicides. These are simple things. We should be opening up that communication between parents, children, and schools. I don't know how to, well, let me get back to that. Following Parkland, I learned that the school would run a drill to test their preparedness for and train in the event of an active school shooter situation. This is something that's really important to me personally because this is something that, because I was so early in the trend, we did not have. And when my son came back from it, I was really disappointed with the information that I received. He was told by his teacher that the lockdown drill was to keep them safe if a large, dangerous animal ever got into the school. While I understand it needs to be age appropriate, this doesn't address the goal of keeping these children safe. I contacted the school and they let me know that the teachers have some discretion as to how to address it with the class. Again, the teachers have too many hats on already. Please, school board, give them some guidance. They need more information on what is age appropriate for these children. Most kids in kindergarten have already been exposed to the concept of good guys and bad guys, and they're aware of the existence of guns, but my sons, when I asked what they should do if they saw someone with a gun, I realized how lax I was because they both responded they should try to take it away. Gun violence education, gun education would be such a simple thing to teach, like stop, drop, and roll, dare, in a non-lockdown situation, just telling them, this is what guns are. Someone else said this. This is what guns are. This is what you do if you see one. Do you run? Who do you tell? It's all simple information to help keep them safe in all settings, not just school. And if you broach it as all settings, not just in school, it's less setting them up for fear within the school, but setting them up to be safe with life overall. Thank you all.
So, Mr. Brown, Mr. Williams, Mr. Loger, Mr. Looney. Okay. Are there any other people that would like to speak tonight? We have 4 spots. Yes, sir. If you could come to the podium, make your remarks by introducing yourself first, and then share your details with the clerk once you've completed speaking.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Caleb Johnston, and I live in Herndon. I just feel that it would be important to note a certain case study that I haven't heard mentioned this evening, which would be my alma mater, Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. Now, this is a school where professors, staff, and students, if they're the appropriate age and they've already gone through the process of getting a concealed carry permit, including background checks and training as well, are allowed to carry firearms concealed on campus. I think it's very important to note that there haven't been any incidents with this program, and Liberty University has had this as their policy for years. The teachers that I've talked with who carry regularly, a lot of them were prior military, a lot of them have had additional training outside of the program, and there have been no incidents there, and I just think it's a very important case study to keep in mind. Thank you.
Please. Good evening. My name is Katherine Smith. I am the proud wife of Jerry Connolly and the very proud mother of Caitlin Connolly, who went through kindergarten, grade school, elementary school, and high school in Fairfax County, which propelled her to become a double who at the University of Virginia. Lots of pride in the family. As I wasn't prepared to speak tonight, but as I listened to all of this, several things crossed my mind, one of which is the position that you all are in. I understand, and I think we probably all understand if we stop and think about it, that not one of you wants to be a member of the school board should something horrible happen in our schools. Not one of you wants to feel that you have the responsibility for that. That's a terrible spot for you all, and I understand how difficult that is. I also understand how easy it is for all of us to be reactionary. And it's so easy when someone punches you to just want to punch back. It's very hard to step back and try to look at things from a more global perspective. And I've heard some really wonderful, interesting testimony tonight. I should say I grew up with guns. I'm from rural Pennsylvania, and we were farmers and hunters and You know, everybody had a gun and everybody went out and shot something, except me, I have to confess. The girls didn't do much of that. So I am not, by definition, anti-gun. I am, however, in favor of sort of reasonable, thoughtful perspectives on how we address these issues. And people tonight have raised concerns about mental health, which is really significant, and we know there are statistics everywhere. In Woodson, my daughter's high school, several years ago, 5 boys over 2 years took their own lives. That is a serious issue for the school. And we know that a lot of what happens with these shooters actually comes from a sense of isolation, of there may be mental illnesses, there may be bullying, there may be isolation. I think we need to think about that as a cause for some of these terrible shootings and horrendous occurrences. I also think that the points that people raised tonight about thinking about the broader picture of security, instead of assuming that the answer to securing our schools is, you know, more armed officers or armed teachers, and I don't know any who wants to be faced with having to shoot a student coming towards them. I think we ought to think about the bigger pictures of security and what does it take to secure a school building, any building. And I think if we focus there, and we focus on things like bulletproof glass or other options that people have talked about tonight, that would be a really good use of your resources, our resources. Thank you very much.
Anybody else have comments to be made? No. We do have 2 more slides. Okay. Well, thank you again for coming out tonight to share your comments with the board. This meeting is adjourned, and have a good evening.